tuning in. Listen, I get a lot of questions about how I make these ukuleles. The number one question I get is how I bend the sides. So I figured I'd give you a little tutorial. If you're interested in watching, thank you for watching. Okay, so first I start off with some strips of wood. Now these are already milled down to 2 millimeters, okay? And they're matching grain, so I have a nice matching grain on them right there. So what happens is now I have them soaked. I sprayed them down with a veneer softener that I've made of glycerin, denatured alcohol, and mostly distilled water. The first time I made that veneer softener, I did not use the distilled water and wound up with etchings actually from the minerals in my water. So we use distilled water now. So the first thing we do is we spray that down, and these have been sprayed down about 5 minutes ago because you want to give the veneer softener a chance to soak in there. Then we start with some sheets of metal. Okay, this is a relatively thick sheet of metal. I've got 2 of them. I've actually got 3 of them, but one of them is not really, you'll see. This one here is, I got to straighten it back out from the last time I did it. Okay, and then this is, I've got 2 sheets of metal right here. And I got some sheets of, this is just packing paper. Regular old packing paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sandwich with these, of the wood, the packing paper, with the veneer softener, and I'm going to use this right here. This is a silicone heating blanket. It gets to about 500 degrees in about 5 minutes. So we only let it run for about 2 minutes before we turn off the power. So now we start with this. Now with the first sheet of metal, and then we spray down our veneer softener on a sheet of paper. We lay this paper down right like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. Make sure I get it good and wet. Now the one thing I did also find in my time of doing this is that the veneer softener, since it does contain glycerin, actually feeds mildew and molds. So can't leave it soaking for too long and soaking in there. So then we pick a nice direction of the grain. We want the grain to kind of match up like that. So as we do that, we just tip it like this, and that's going to be the bottom part of our ukulele. Now this is where they meet on the bottom part. The neck we don't really care too much about how the grain lines up because it's going to be at the top. It's going to meet underneath the neck, and you won't actually see that matchup. What I'm doing is I'm making sure this is perfectly aligned with the edges of the metal. Once that's perfectly aligned, then we can spray down another sheet of paper. If I can just find it. Here it is. Spray down this other piece of paper here. Now I spray it down first with water, just so it's a lot of times the paper's curled up because that's the way it was stored, and it won't be very it doesn't like to behave and stay and go in the direction I want it to go. So we're just basically wetting down this paper. That paper is going to start to cause the steam. I'm going to take this top piece and we're going to lay this right on top. Now I'm going to leave this a little bit proud here because the most important layer is the bottom layer. The top layer doesn't have to be perfectly aligned. That bottom layer does, and you'll see why later in a few minutes. So that's on there. That's just about right. Line that up. You can see my edges of my wood, and that's going to be just important. It's going to be what I need. Now I'm going to take this heating blanket here. I'm going to lay it over the edges of the wood. So now this heating blanket is what's actually going to heat up the whole thing and cause it to steam. And then we just take this scrap piece of metal here, straighten it out, and this is just so the heating blanket doesn't. I don't put my blocks directly on the heating blanket, so that's fine, and that's what we're looking at. So I'll grab some binder clips. And clip this together, basically making my sandwich. We are at the bending form. Okay, so what we do at this point is we're going to take my sandwich and I'm going to lay this out right here. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this I'm gonna line this up. I'm gonna line up. I've got a little shim here, right next to my form here. See this shim here? That is okay. Shim probably not the right word, but it's a stand. It's a stand. So I'm gonna line this up. First thing I do is I line this up so I can get my piece in, slip my bending form into the piece here and butt it right down against that form there. So that's nice and straight. Straight to the form, it's locked in place, pushed against that. And then I take my tool. I had a buddy of mine make this tool for me. He drilled up I needed a socket that got really deep. So thank you, Tommy. And that tightens that up. So now we're in line. We're on the form. And we're just going to put these clamps here like this. And as you can see, so we've got our form. It's lined up at the bottom. And the form is ready to go. So now, here's a waiting game. Here's the fun part. Now we plug in this, we wait 2 minutes, so I'll go get my stopwatch ready, start my stopwatch, plug it in, and then we're going to wait for 2 minutes. So as this is going, it eventually is what you'll start to see here is you'll start to see some steam coming up. At some point, you'll start to see steam coming up off the top. 2 minutes is feels like a long time when you're waiting for this to happen, simply because if you go any much longer than that, you will burn the wood. If all the water steams off of it, the wood will start to burn. So you have to make sure that you're not going too long there. I can already start to see some steam coming up here. We're only at about 50 minutes. So the key here is, enough steam that you can bend the wood, but not so much heat that you burn the wood. If you try to bend the wood before it's well softened and steamed up, you will wind up cracking the wood. Typically, it's cracking around the edges of the wood when you're bending it down. And that kind of forces you to decide either to scrap that wood or to make it a shallow body, trim off the cracks and make it a shallow body. Actually, that's right over here. Is what happened to me on just recently. I had to turn a tenor into a shallow body tenor because that's how that goes. So we are at 1 minute and 45 seconds. We have a good amount of steam coming up. We're coming almost on 2 minutes now. When we hit 2 minutes, I'll reach over, unplug it, and then I will actually do, we're unplugged, I will actually do the bending unplugged, because if it takes a little bit longer, and as I bend it, you can hear some of the wood, some of the water in there steaming off, boiling, so to speak. Now, as I work this piece over, it happens pretty quickly. As I work this piece over the edge here on my form, the table, I always do this. I always put the back in the wrong spot, so I rotate that around. And that's very, very hot right now, so don't burn yourself, Mike. Alright, now we'll just pop this here like that. And bring this down to here. So slide that over a little bit so we're centered. The one thing I do want to make sure of when I'm doing this is that these screws, these clamps are perfectly vertical. If they're not, and they're off to the side, you wind up splaying the whole thing. So then I take my tool, I very slowly pull that down before it gets too tight. And make sure I take the clips off and make sure I have a nice tight seam around the edges here. And then as I do that, I can take this. I'm still feeling plenty of heat here. Put this down a little bit. Now while I'm screwing this down, I will add a little bit more heat just to, you know, make it a little bit more compliant. Key is going slow, but not too slow. Got water oozing out of this right now, which is good because that means that I've got plenty of fluids in there to keep this whole thing from burning. All right, we are fully tightened down all the way around. We're fully tightened down over on this side. You can't really see on this side because this is always going to be a gap here because the wood is across there. There's no wood right in this section here. There's wood. It's up to about here. So then you take the two final binder clips off, and you slip this on like this, and then you just simply pull this down. Like so. And then screw it in. Okay, that is now fully bent. Everything's in there. I have a nice tight view here. Everything is fairly level and even, and we're pretty good to go. Thanks for watching. This is how we bend ukulele sides.